Hello everyone and welcome back to the FPL Phillips YouTube channel. It's time for my transfer plans and players to buy video ahead of Game Week 5. With the only kind of assets that I'm looking at the moment, ones that I've got a little bit on the watch list, some ones that I'm ruling out as well that you guys might be looking at yourselves, so maybe some thoughts there to think about too. So all that to get into in today's video. Make sure to subscribe if you're one of the new people watching the video, as only around 12% of you watching are actually subscribed. And do leave a thumbs up on the video as well, that would really help me out and be appreciated. If you want to leave a comment down below as well with any of your own FPL questions ahead of Game Week 5, at any time you leave the comment whenever you're watching this video before the deadline, you can put your comment down below and I will try my very best to get back to every single comment as I have done on every single one of my last couple of videos. Without any further ado, let's get into talking some FPL. But before we get into having a look at the individual players, I just wanted to take a look at the fixture ticker over the next 6 game weeks, as we tend to do before looking at individual assets. Let's see if their teams in the first place have fixtures that are worth targeting. And I've kind of put this green box that highlights over on the left-hand side the teams that I think are worth having a look at. So Bournemouth and Luton, although they have the highest ranked fixtures, probably aren't ones you're going to be looking at for players. Maybe Dom Solanke up front could be one that's going still under the radar at this point, but other than that, I wouldn't be looking at any of the Bournemouth assets. We've got Newcastle, Spurs, Brentford, Villa, Liverpool, Arsenal, and then Manchester United are the 7 teams that I think are the ones who should be kind of top of your priority list. And despite this, there are a few tricky fixtures in there. Spurs notably have Arsenal and Liverpool in Game Week 6 and Game Week 7. We've got Brentford having Newcastle away and Manchester United away in Game Week 5 and Game Week 8 respectively. Liverpool have a few tricky fixtures in there as well, but overall, I think this is the fixture ticket you want to be focusing on if you're looking a little bit long term. But there is a popular chip use strategy that will be affecting the kind of game week range that you want to be looking at. And that chip usage will be the wildcard in Game Week 9, which is looking like a popular strategy for a lot of managers at the moment, and with good reason. We just have an international break at the moment between Game Week 4 and Game Week 5, where I think a few managers will be wildcarding, but I think the more popular international break to wildcard will be between that Game Week 8 and Game Week 9, where we have, again, that 2 kind of week break, where there's more opportunity for price changes to go up and down, so more value to be gained there. And plus, you might get a few odd injuries here or there, which will give you the added gain that you can get on a wildcard by using it in that period. There are also quite a few number of fixture swings that occur at that time, but basically, if you're going to use the wildcard in Game Week 9, then you're only going to be wanting to look over a 4 game week range until now, and with the free transfers that you have remaining up until that point, it's only really worth focusing them on the teams that have the best fixtures up until that period. So you can see the teams in this different kind of green box over here. There are some teams that weren't included before, and there are also some notable teams towards the bottom. So although someone like a Jared Bowen is performing really well at the moment, West Ham have the worst ranked fixtures over the next 4. They're facing Man City, Liverpool and Newcastle in those next 4 games. Brighton are facing Manchester United, Villa and Liverpool over the next 4. And although teams like United and Liverpool aren't performing great, particularly defensively, although Liverpool did keep a clean sheet last game week, they're still tough fixtures on paper to go ahead and target for some of these teams. So I'd be looking more towards grabbing players from teams who you can see more towards the top of this basically. But if you want to go and check out the Timber fixture ticker for yourself, you can do so via the link in the description. Are completely free to access, and you can adjust all the game week ranges for whatever kind of period you want to look at, and you can have a look even at some of those fixture swings that do occur later on around the Game Week 9 wildcard time if you're wanting to convince yourself that that's the time to play the chip for you. And one final thing that I wanted to touch on before we get into having a look at the individual players are defences this season, and particularly, are they going to be worth targeting your transfers towards? Is it even worth looking too much at defensive clean sheet fixtures and basically thinking, oh, those fixtures look great, there's going to be a clean sheet in it for that team there, or are there going to be so fewer clean sheets than last year that it's almost not worth it from the upside? And I've kind of ranked the defences here. You can see this is taken from the Fantasy Football Fix Optastats tool. The teams are ranked by expected goals conceded over the first 4 game weeks, so it is a little bit of a small sample size, but you can see the better defences up towards the top. So unsurprisingly, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, these teams are here, and the weaker defences towards the bottom, so Fulham, Luton and Bournemouth. And now this might be affected, well, it will be affected by the teams that they've played over the first 4 game weeks, and so some teams will be lower down due to having tougher fixtures over the opening few games, whereas some teams may be a little bit higher up than they should be or will be over the course of the season due to them having some kinder fixtures early on. But I just thought it was interesting, and it also kind of leads me on to talking a little bit about why I'm not going to be targeting as many of my transfers this year towards defensive changes, and I'm kind of looking towards getting set up with just a back three or a back five that I can rotate and I'm happy with, full of slightly more attacking defenders that I can just leave and kind of be happy with, and maybe even play through some tougher fixtures on paper, just because clean sheets look like they're going to be hard to come by and even a little bit hard to predict this year as well. And now, some of you might think I'm overreacting to this based on last game week, so I wanted to have a little bit of a look at the numbers myself. And in last season, we were used to a rate of kind of 5.45 clean sheets per game week. That was the average across the entirety of last season. But over the first 3 game weeks of this season, so not including last game week, we saw 4 clean sheets per game week, and we only saw 2, of course, last game week too. So there has been a decrease, and part of this is due to the new added time rule, so having new minutes as well. But overall, there just has been a change, and the numbers are what I wanted to have a look at. And in terms of the expected clean sheets, what are we predicting in terms of over the course of the season will happen to clean sheets, and will it be worth spending your transfers as much on defenders as it will be on your midfielders and attackers? Because at the moment, that's kind of what I'm hypothesizing, that midfielders and forwards are going to be much more worthwhile having their transfers spent on in terms of changing them around and targeting attacking fixtures rather than attacking defenders and looking to get points from clean sheets, if that makes sense. So over the course of last season, the average expected clean sheet data, which is, a prediction of what a team should get in terms of clean sheets, was 0.33 mean average. Whereas over the first 4 game weeks of this season, it's been 0.24, so that's per 90. So a drastic decrease from 0.33 down to 0.24, which if you kind of expand over the course of the season, makes up for some significant changes in terms of numbers. And now, before you quite rightly argue that over the first 4 game weeks isn't necessarily going to represent the entirety of last season, of course not, it's hard to go on that data, but coincidentally last season the average of 0.33 was actually the same average over the first 4 game weeks as it was over the last season. So the first 4 game weeks, although it might have been a coincidence, did actually represent on average what happened over the entirety of last season. So we can kind of assume, or take a gamble on assuming, that 0.24 mean average, so the decrease in clean sheets this season, is maybe a sign of things to come. And so from that expected clean sheet average of 0.33 per 90 last season, we saw 207 clean sheets in FPL. And if I remember, I'll kind of put my stats and working out on screen right now, so hopefully you guys can follow along. So from the 380 games, the expected clean sheet data would have predicted 125, but we saw 207 clean sheets. So I'm just kind of using those numbers to scale up the expected clean sheet numbers from this season to see and predict how many clean sheets we should be getting from the data from over the first 4 game weeks. So if we use that to scale up, it gives us 151 clean sheets this season, which is 56 fewer than last season. So that is a big decrease in the number of clean sheets that we're going to see in FPL, which when you think about it in terms of 4 points for a clean sheet for each defender and for each goalkeeper, is a lot fewer points. I think it's 280 points less for defenders and goalkeepers, assuming a back 4 and a goalkeeper. So it will be even fewer than that, you think. It will be an even bigger points loss due to the fact that some teams do end up playing a back 5. So basically what I figured out is that it kind of looks like, if we're assuming what's happened over the first 4 game weeks is going to continue, there's going to be a lot less upside, and even less upside, I'd argue, than previous seasons and using transfers on your defenders, just because of the decreased chances of clean sheets that we're going to see this season. And of course, on the counter side of having more minutes and more goals being conceded, that's going to lend itself even more to having more attackers in your team, and more of the value, I suppose, in the transfers and the value you get from those spent on your front 7 or front 8, however many attackers you're playing in your FPL team. So I just thought that was interesting. I didn't know if any of you guys have had similar thoughts or anything like that. If you want to feel free to counter-argument the other way, you can do so down below in the comments. I just thought it would be interesting to bring up and more so start a discussion around it, because right now I'm looking at focusing my transfers on either getting a back 5 sorted and kind of sticking with it long term, or just focusing my transfers on attackers, maybe even using them to jump on players for even 1 or 2 game weeks, looking at more short-term attacking changes and focusing almost all of my transfers there, rather than making defensive switches. And on that note, let's start off with 2 attackers for the transfer plans and the players to target. and discuss these two guys who performed very, very well in game week 4, Ferguson bagging a hat-trick and Alvarez scoring a 14-pointer for his owners, and a really, really good all-round performance from Alvarez, and a haul that I definitely thought was coming from last week, even with the game against Sheffield United. He looked fantastic, his data was brilliant there, and yeah, it was a well-deserved return, really, for people who chose to go with Alvarez, and people who jumped on last week definitely did so at the right time. And he's continued to play every single minute, basically, is the thing to take away from this, is that Manchester City are playing Alvarez a hell of a lot more than they did last season, and he looks just as good as when he was on the pitch last season. And whilst Ferguson has played a much fewer average minutes per 90 because he's been coming off the bench the majority of the time, don't let that kind of exceptional data from Ferguson make it seem that the expected FPL points per 90 and the XG per 90 of Alvarez isn't as good as it is, because 7.0 for the expected FPL and 0.46 for the XG are fantastic numbers, and his XA is also very excellent, meaning his XGI is up there, with some of the best in the league right now, and his expected points over the next 3 game weeks, where he's got those kind fixtures of West Ham United, Forest and Wolves, could definitely be ones to target. And I think that it's still a chance to bring him in, and it's kind of why I've even shone away from going for a Manchester City defender, because maybe I'm still a little bit scarred or blinded by last season where they conceded so many late goals. Is that even though they look like one of the best, or they are the best defence in the league statistically this season, I would much rather leave the door open for having Foden in my midfield, as I do right now, Haaland of course, and then Alvarez as well as my second striker. The problem is with Jackson right now is I'm going to have to hold on to him. I would love to bring Alvarez in if I had maybe a different forward option and wanted to take a little bit of a gamble over those next 4 game weeks, even though it would include Arsenal. Before wildcarding in game week 9, I would definitely love to own Alvarez over those next 3 game weeks, because I think it's safe to kind of assume and go on trends with the fact that he's playing 90 minutes per game. Assume that's going to continue as much as you can predict starting lineups with Pep Roulette and all that. But Alvarez looks brilliant. He'd definitely be the one that I would prefer to Ferguson. Also notably because that Danny Welbeck was injured. It doesn't seem like it's a serious injury. We of course have the international break now, which means that Welbeck could be in line for a return by the end of that period. And that means that Ferguson will most likely either get fewer reduced minutes where he does play alongside Welbeck, which we've seen a number of times, or Welbeck could come back in. João Pedro could still start games, although De Zerbi doesn't seem to like him too much at the moment. And then Ferguson could drop down to the bench and just be used as that sub. And when you combine that with the kind of slightly tricky fixtures that they've got, especially over those next 4, they've only really got one favourable fixture, being that Bournemouth at home game in game week 6. I think that there's probably better striker options to look at the moment who are playing and assured of far more minutes with much better fixtures, and Alvarez is one such example of one of those forwards. So the expected FPL points data looks fantastic, the XG looks amazing, of course. His expected points don't look as good due to those fixtures and those X-Mins being lower from FPL review. So yeah, I would definitely urge you to not go with Ferguson. I'm sure many of you watching this video probably aren't really thinking about it too much anyway, but Alvarez would definitely be the one to go for out of these 2 forwards if I was picking one to bring in this game week. And to be honest, because I own Jackson, I'm not really looking at a striker, but I know a few of you might. But even though these 2 look like the standouts from game week 4, there is one other forward who I really like the look of at the start of the season, and to be honest, has proven me wrong. With his tough fixtures, he has continued to perform despite them. And that has to be Awoniyi of Nottingham Forest. He's looked absolutely fantastic and continued his form in from the end of last season, where he looked brilliant, into this season. And I covered him in a couple of videos that I did at the start of the year, and I think like a lot of managers, I kind of naively maybe even said that those fixtures were putting me off too much and I wasn't going to go for him. But he's more than proven us wrong, and despite that injury that he had at the start of the year, he's come straight back in and he's picked up from where he left off at the end of last season. And he actually has a nice fixture this game week. This will typically be the one where he comes in now and doesn't perform, but I think that he's definitely one that, given the data over the first couple of weeks, is one that you should back. Now, Nottingham Forest over the next 6, because they face Man City, they face Liverpool, they have Brentford as well. They do only rank 12th in terms of fixture difficulty, but I think that he's one that if you're looking long term, you could definitely target as well. I kind of mentioned that a lot of managers will be wildcarding in that game week 9 period, where maybe if you are, then he's not really worth looking at. I know that his form kind of suggests he can score against anyone at the moment, and I think he probably can. It's still just very hard to look at those fixtures away at the Etihad and go, yeah, I back him to score there, and I'd definitely be able to be self-assured that I will start him in my team ahead of someone with a kind of fixture, and so you could end up with quite a number of points on the bench. But he's looked brilliant. He's taking loads of shots from fantastic areas, as you can see with his shot map, which I pulled up on screen here as well. 6.69 expected FPL points per 90 and an XG of 0.66 is really, really quite good. 0.14 XG as well, and 10.6 expected points over the next 3 game weeks, despite the fixtures, is a very healthy total, ahead of Ferguson, who we saw in the last slide as well. So definitely kind of a dark horse forward that I would love to bring in and own, and I'm sure I will do in maybe a few game weeks' time at the earliest. But to be honest, I can't just quite justify bringing him in for Jackson right now. Still only like that 4% ownership mark, which is mind-bogglingly low, to be honest. The data suggests you should go there. I'm not quite brave enough myself. I'm sure the people who do jump on him will probably be rewarded. But yeah, he looks like a fantastic forward option. Kind of wish I'd backed him enough to go against the tough fixtures at the start of the season. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. I definitely wasn't brave enough to back him in those games that he's ended up scoring in. And he's looked fantastic at the start of the season. And yeah, it is a joy to watch him scoring so many goals, because I do rate him and I think he's a quality player. And to be honest, I can't wait to have him in my FPL team. Let me know if you're thinking, or maybe even convinced that you might want to go for him yourself. If you can bench him in game week 6, then maybe that could be a nice little upside as well. So if you have another midfielder, say you have 5 midfielders and you're looking to add that third forward in, and you want to just bench him in game week 6 but maybe start him in the rest of them, perhaps you own someone like a Matoma, and we saw that Brighton kind of have that nice fixture in game week 6 at home to Bournemouth, and you could rotate Matoma if you still want to own him with an Awoniyi as a third striker or something like that. That could be an option too. But yeah, definitely looking at wanting to own him in the near future, and hopefully sooner than not he'll be part of my FPL side. And then, of course, there's the 4.5 million forward who I should have owned at the start of the season. I went with Mbama. I didn't know if Archer was going to end up moving. He did end up moving from Aston Villa over to Sheffield United, and a lot of people will probably be one step ahead in terms of transfers by having this guy in as their third striker. But of course, it's one that can occur on the wildcard as well. I'm not sure many people will be starting him over the next couple of fixtures, because Sheffield United rank pretty low in terms of fixture difficulty for the next couple of games, because you can kind of see only the one green fixture, although I don't take the green, grey, red colour scheme from FPL that too seriously. They don't look great on paper. There's quite a few away games in there as well. I don't think many of us are going to be starting Archer, like some quite rightly did against Everton, where he managed to grab 12 points. So kudos to you if you did start him. But I think before the wild card, could he be an option to bring in before that point as well? If he's a 4.5 million forward who's only sitting on your bench each week, there's not really much point. But maybe game week 8 could be the time to bring him in, just even as a 1 week punt to give you an unholy amount of funds in midfield to maybe upgrade to someone like a Salah and have Salah and Son in your team for 1 week before a wild card. I've even thought about maybe even downgrading Haaland in game week 8 for 1 week, where Haaland does face up against Arsenal, and just bringing Archer in if I could even find a way to spend those extra funds in midfield. But that's just an extreme example. There are other cases where you could do that, but game week 8 would be kind of the point where I'd consider jumping on him. And before then, there's not really too much point, because it wouldn't be my second striker I'm taking out. I'm not going to be starting Archer every week. But the data looked fantastic, and I just thought it was worth bringing him up. If you do use a wild card at any point soon, make sure he's in your team. And at game week 9, at the latest, he will be in my side as well, given that I'm going to be wild carding most likely in that game week. And so, one of the main and key players and the standouts from Game Week 4, of course, Heung-min Son, who played through the middle and is looking like a very, very good FPL option at the moment, has been deemed by some as this week's Raheem Sterling, where he's had one good game and isn't actually quite the asset that one game week would suggest, but I think it's very different for Son, and due to the fact that he's had the position change, is going to be the main standout thing. Now, on the flip side, there's a slim chance that Richarlison could come back in, but I wouldn't see anyone with a right brain doing that, and I don't think Ange is going to necessarily bring Richarlison back in and play him through the middle with how Son performed last game week. They have, of course, signed Brennan Johnson now, who could be also a very interesting option at 5.9 million and classified as a midfielder in FPL. He could be an excellent option if he does come through and maybe even ends up being the starting striker. They have paid a lot of money for him, that near enough 50 million, wasn't it, to bring him into the side and make him a lot of promises. You'd assume some of those promises would be that some serious game time is going to be given to him. Now, I'm not quite aware what the situation would be. Solomon looked very good off the left. Would Brennan Johnson come in and play off the left, or would Son move back out to that position, and would Brennan Johnson come in through the middle? I think that's the main thing with Son at the moment, is just thinking about whether or not he's going to hold on to that position in the first place. I'd say it's probably about 50-50 at this point. Spurs fans might know more than I do, so feel free to comment down below and inform us of your views, because you're probably the most aware people of how Ange is looking like he's going to set up his system. But yeah, that is a little bit of doubt with Son at the moment. There's also kind of the penalty thing. Although Son looks maybe the favourite to take penalties, the other man in this graphic, Maddison, could quite easily be the spot kick taker. We don't really know who that's going to be for Spurs yet, as we've not seen them had a penalty. But I think either way, a lot of people are going to be loading up on Spurs assets. Maddison, Udogie, who were already very popular, maybe adding in Son as well to complete that, probably the optimal triple up from Spurs that you can go for at the moment. They haven't got Europe. They've got some really nice fixtures long term, despite those two tricky ones in Game Week 6 against Arsenal and Game Week 7 against Liverpool. I still think that it's worth going through for them and probably even starting them in those games. We see the North London derby have a lot of goals in the past. We've seen Liverpool concede a lot of goals this season too. I wouldn't be concerned, and with how attacking Spurs look as a team, I think that's the main appealing factor at the moment, is they're going to score a hell of a lot of goals from what we've seen this season. It looks like that will continue, and under his management, I think Postecoglou will do very well with them and have them putting the ball in the opponent's net a lot of times. So who do you go for if you can only grab one this week? Well, the data from the over the first 3 game weeks is going to be, slightly towards Son being worse, because the fact that he was playing off the left where he wasn't the asset that he looks, where in Game Week 4 he played through the middle. But despite this, Son's data always kind of doesn't look the absolute best, and he's kind of proven himself as a more clinical finisher. He outscores his XG more often than not over the previous seasons. He does very well with the chances that he has. And when you consider this, and also the fact that his data looks very similar to Maddison's, you'd think that Son is going to be the best asset to own right now. And although he's 9.1 million, I think that not too many people are going for Salah right now. And so we have the funds to be able to afford grabbing Son in our midfield. I don't think the main thing with Son is that him as a self doubting whether he's a good option. I think he's definitely going to be. I think it's which midfielder do you take out of your side to bring Son in, and do you do it as soon as this game week for the Sheffield United game, or do you give it a few more game weeks, maybe until game week 8 or even a wild card in game week 9, say, waiting for that point and then seeing which midfielder you want to take out, and also knowing whether or not for sure you want to bring Son in. So it's very much a case kind of similar to Sterling, where do you jump on early or do you give it a few more weeks to see if kind of 1 week is going to represent how things go in the future as well. And so a lot of us will have a midfield featuring, maybe 1 or 2 Manchester United players, so Bruno and Rashford, who not many are looking to take out, and Mbeumo as well, who's going nowhere pretty much. Saka in a lot of midfields at the moment too. Some people will have Foden and Maddison. So there's a lot of good midfielders at the moment, and I think a lot of managers have a very strong looking midfield 5. So is there one worth taking out for Son right now? Or would the sensible thing be, with the midfields that we've got, just to hang on to them for a game week or 2 more, see what the assessment is over the next few, whether Brennan Johnson coming in affects Son's position, whether or not that affects Son's game time as well, because he hasn't played every minute so far this season. He has only averaged 81 minutes per game and has been subbed early on a few occasions, albeit when he was playing off the left. So it will be interesting to see, I think, over the next few, whether or not I do want to end up bringing him in. But I'm not going to go with him in Game Week 5, more likely than not, I would say, which does pay me because I think it's a really, really nice fixture for Spurs. I think they're going to score a lot of goals probably in that game, just as well as they will over the next couple of game weeks. but I'm not sure I can just quite justify taking out any of my midfield options at the moment. I think the most likely for me would be to remove Phil Foden probably and take him out for Son, which I can actually afford to do this week, and maybe that will allow me to bring Alvarez in up front in the near future. But with one free transfer, I'm more likely to just probably roll that than do Son in this week. But if you have 2 free transfers maybe, then could definitely seem like a great possibility. I really like the look of him. I don't think it's another case of the Sterling where he's had one good game and maybe isn't going to deliver in future game weeks. That being said, Sterling could of course had multiple returns last week. Nick Jackson missing that chance from, 2 yards out from a Sterling assist. So Sterling, arguably got unlucky in game week 4 as well. I think Son is going to be a much better asset than Sterling on the whole, especially if he continues playing through the middle. And I think that's the main appeal of him. And something that isn't 100% certain at the moment is maybe the only thing putting me off going early and pulling the trigger this week to go for him. But I think if you need a midfield option this week, he's by far the standout option to go with and bring in to your side. And now, as much as there are so many great midfielders at the moment, I have also been considering a move for a Liverpool midfield asset. And I'm recording this at the time where there are rumours of another Saudi bid coming in that could be in ridiculous numbers, like 200 million even, for Salah to go and play in that league. And I think the Saudi transfer window does close on Thursday or something, so we should know before game week 5 whether Salah's going to be staying in the Premier League or not. I think it's looking more and more likely that he probably will, but I don't know if there will be an offer too good to refuse that will come in and Salah may end up leaving. So this whole segment may be irrelevant by the time you're even watching the video, so feel free to just skip through it. Obviously, you probably already have if it does end up being irrelevant, but I just thought it'd be interesting to have a look at that kind of price difference between Luis Diaz and Salah. If we do end up looking to bring one in, does Diaz present a better value option than Salah right now? Because there are lots of midfielders at good prices. There's only really Haaland as the premium mark who people are going for at the moment. Is it even worth trying to find the funds, maybe even from downgrading other players, to try and go for Salah if you're looking to invest in a Liverpool asset? And is the kind of flip side of what Salah offers in terms of Luis Diaz's cons enough to put me off from going for him as a whole? Now, the minutes are a little bit skewed here, and the minutes per game because of Luis Diaz being substituted early in the Newcastle game where Van Dijk was sent off. Liverpool had to make a defensive switch, and Luis Diaz was the one who ended up being sacrificed, despite looking pretty lively early in that game when I watched it. So that's why the asterisk is there, because the minutes per game are a little bit skewed, but I have used per 90 data for the rest of the stats. And even in that case, Salah is far ahead of Diaz on expected FPL per 90, XG per 90, which does include the penalty, of course, and that kind of rebound chance, which will be taking him up a little bit more than maybe it should. Expected assists per 90 as well also go in favour of Salah, and expected points over the next 3 game weeks. Salah is always scoring very well in those. So overall, although the price difference is quite significant, Salah, with his minutes assurance and also the better data, is probably the only Liverpool attacking asset I'll be considering at the moment. Not only really because of the data, but just because that I really hate seeing my player go off at like the 60th, 70 minute mark. It really does reduce their appeal a lot for me. And that just happens with Luis Diaz and whichever of the 2 Liverpool attackers that star alongside Mo Salah, whether it's Nunez and Jota, whether it's Gakpo. Those kind of 4, including Diaz with that as well, are often substituted around quite a lot. And when Gakpo was playing in midfield, there was maybe a little bit less chance of that. But now that Gakpo has kind of been removed from that midfield role, Liverpool have brought in those midfield reinforcements. They've got Szoboszlai, they've got McAllister, they've got Endo in as well now. They've got Gravenberch from Bayern, so they have the midfield options in there, so they don't really need to play Gakpo in midfield, and I don't think he looked at his best there either. So I think it is going to be back to kind of what we assumed would happen at the start of the season, with Diaz, Gakpo, Jota and Nunez all fighting for those 2 spots alongside Mo Salah. So if he does stay, I still think he's the only real Liverpool option I will be loading up on. I think Diaz is a fantastic player, and if he was a little bit more minutes assured, I would be going for him in the next couple of game weeks. Just right now, with the midfield that I've got that I'm happy with, I'm not too convinced that I even want to load up on a Liverpool attacker at all. But if I did, I would probably try and find the funds for Salah, which wouldn't be as hard for me as maybe it would be for other people, given that I actually started the season with him and downgraded him to Foden only 2 game weeks ago. Right then, I suppose we better talk about some defenders at least, and after giving them a tough time, I have actually gone with two very attacking defenders anyway, where even though they might not grab you some clean sheets, they could still grab you an attacking return in that game, and I've gone with Udogie and I've gone with Cash. Now, I do already own Udogie as an option, but I think if you don't own him right now, he is probably the one that I would prioritise bringing in. But I wanted to compare him and his data next to Matty Cash's, who looks like the best attacking defender in the league at the moment, given that he started the last two games in a kind of more attacking right wing back, almost right midfield role in that Villa side. So Matty Cash has looked fantastic. His data, you can see, even blows Udogie's out the water. His expected FPL points per 90, his XGI per 90, even the expected clean sheets actually look better for Villa slightly than they do for Spurs, which isn't overall that convincing. I don't think Tottenham have looked brilliant defensively, but Aston Villa have got a few defensive injuries that do worry me a little bit more going forward now. Tyrone Mings going out early in the season. We've now got a Diego Carlos injury, which I'm uncertain of the severity of, but if he's out for a while, of course that could mean bad things as well. With Konsa probably having to be used as centre-back, that would mean Cash probably pushing back and maybe Villa reverting to that kind of back four system, even in the away games, which tend to be the ones where Cash is playing in that right wing back role, where they're away against maybe even slightly tougher sides, is where he's kind of been allowed to get forward that little bit more. But even in game week 1, we saw against Newcastle, he played rather attacking. I think the main threat to Cash's attacking nature as well will also be where Moreno returns. Alex Moreno played that very attacking left-back role towards the end of last season for Aston Villa, has been ruled out at the start of the season with that injury. But if he returns, whether it's even at the end of the international break or a few game weeks following that, I think that could see Cash have to take on more defensive responsibility, allow Moreno to be the one who on the opposite flank pushes up a lot more, just as we saw towards the end of last season, getting a lot of assists, mainly for Ollie Watkins putting the ball into the back of the net. So there are a few things with Cash that are putting me off a little bit at the moment. Kind of those factors combined with the tough fixtures in game week 6 and game week 7. If I own Udogie and Cash, then I'm going to have to start one of them, and those aren't the nicest fixtures to go with. And all I've said about the clean sheets earlier in the video, I still think that if you have a defender who's got high attacking threat and a nice fixture, that's where you hit the real sweet spot. And I would rather start, someone like a Rico Henry who's got nice fixtures in those 2 game weeks over one of these two guys, even if he's maybe got slightly worse attacking data, just because of the added bonus of the fixture. Not only is there more chance of a clean sheet, but arguably in a kind of fixture, you've got more chance of attacking returns because you're playing against a weaker defence. So it's not all about clean sheets when we look at the fixture for defenders. So Udogie would still be my priority this week, although he's got worse data, although the expected points over the next few do go in favour of Matty Cash. I still think he's the priority transfer for me. He looks brilliant for game week 8 onwards as well, and I think he'd definitely be one that I'd be trying to own at any means necessary, really. And to be honest, maybe even looks better than Chilwell at this rate for the price. So yeah, attacking defenders, really like it. But if you are looking to try and own maybe Udogie and another defender this week, maybe you already own him, maybe you're looking to even make 2 defensive switches, there is probably someone I'd rather go for than having that double up, as I mentioned, of Udogie and Matty Cash. And that man, as you can see on screen here, is Kieran Trippier, or kind of representing any other Newcastle defender, the other 2 options being Fabian Schär, or indeed being Botman, the cheaper option if he's back from injury. And I'm kind of assuming that based on the news reported that the injury isn't too serious, that Botman will either be back by game week 5, which looks probably quite likely, or the very latest game week 6. And if he's not back by game week 5, I won't bring in a Newcastle defender for that one, which I might not do anyway. But game week 6 is the time where I'm really looking at owning a Newcastle defender for those 2 fixtures against Sheffield United and Burnley in successive game weeks. And the reason for that is kind of what I mentioned before, with Udogie having tough fixtures during those 2 weeks. I would love to start Chilwell, also then a Newcastle defender, and one other, whether that ends up being Henry, who's already in my team, or some other kind of defender. So setting up my defence long term with that kind of rotation strategy that I've mentioned in other videos for the previous game weeks could be a very viable thing to do. And it's just whether I'd want to spend the funds going that little bit extra on Kieran Trippier, given the fact that his data over the first couple of game weeks hasn't looked too strong. And now a lot of that will be due to the fact that Newcastle haven't looked the best defensively, and also they have been conceding a lot of goals, as evident by Trippier's average points per 90 of 1.25. But even the expected goal involvement, so his expected assists, isn't as good as it was last season. But Trippier, the one thing we do know with him is that he does have those set pieces. He's on the corners, he's on the free kicks for Newcastle. He has quite a lot of routes to points that the other defenders, Schär and Botman, don't really have. You're kind of relying on them for some set pieces as well. Although we have seen Fabian Schär take some free kicks in the past and actually score some of them. So when I do say Trippier's on free kicks, he isn't always. Fabian Schär does often take them in some goal-scoring positions. In terms of expected clean sheet data, though, that's the main thing that puts me off, is that over the first 4, they've looked worse than Spurs defensively. And now they have had some tough fixtures, but I still am a little bit concerned that they are kind of conceding as many chances as they are this season. But the fixtures do breed the form. We've seen that with other players already this season. We've seen that time and time again in FPL. And the expected points over the next 3 from FPL Review are really backing Trippier to pick things up. And 13.3 expected points is quite some distance ahead of someone like an Udogie. So definitely looking at owning a Newcastle defender at game week 6 probably. I'm very happy to start Udogie, of course, this week, so there's no need for me to really bench him. If I do decide that that's the route I want to go, then maybe I will actually make a defensive transfer and kind of move towards building a defensive system that I'm very happy with long term and that could maybe even save me from using my wild card in game week 9 and saving it for later in the season. So if I kind of build towards this ideal back 5 that I want, that rotates very well with 5 attacking defenders, then that could save me from using the wildcard chip, because I should just be able to, within a few game weeks, kind of navigate to the front kind of attacking 8 or attacking 7 that I do end up wanting in my side. And if you didn't see my last videos and you're new around here, then this is just a reminder and a graphic from last week of that kind of system that I'm looking to build towards, where, you know, I do have Chilwell, I've got Udogie, I've got Henry in my side, and you've got game week 4 in there, which we can kind of ignore for now. But looking to build towards a defensive system looking like this is probably what I want. So I have Chilwell, Estupiñán, Udogie and Henry already. It's just whether or not I bring in that Newcastle defender or that Villa defender to kind of rotate as the final player. So this is kind of what I'm looking at. If I don't bring in a Newcastle defender this week, which I'm assuming that I would start if I do bring in this week, then I'll just have to start Estupiñán away at Manchester United, probably him over Henry away at Newcastle, and then wait until game week 6, where you can see after that, the rotation looks fantastic. I'm able to bench through some of the trickier fixtures on paper and kind of start 3 really attacking defenders with good fixtures every single game week for the foreseeable future. So I really like the look of this. Let me know if you've thought about something like this yourselves. If you want to see the one that includes Matty Cash instead of Kieran Trippier, then you can go and check out my previous video as well. But that's just kind of the thing that I wanted to end on, and the kind of thing where I'm suggesting that maybe only 1 more defensive transfer is required for me over the next kind of God knows how many game weeks, and then I'll be able to set myself up with a defensive system that I'm happy to rotate with and just focus my transfers on my attackers, which kind of aligns with what I've mentioned earlier in the video about just going for those attacking defensive options and focusing a little bit less on clean sheets, but just starting the defenders that have the best chance of them and not being too fussed as whether they come in or not. So yeah, that's what I'm going to end today's video on. Let me know if that has prompted any thoughts yourself with regards to your transfers for this week. Let me know your guys' transfer plans down below in the comments, and you can ask me any other FPL related questions to do with your own team. If you just want to send your own entire team in a list, then feel free to do that. However many free transfers and money in the bank you've got, I'll try and help you out with my thoughts on your transfers ahead of this game week if you would like my opinion. If you want to just drop a team screenshot instead, you can do so via the Discord server. The link is down below in the description to that. And if you'd like to consider supporting the channel by becoming a member, the link to do so is also down there in the description, or you can alternatively hit the join button if you can see that down below. Make sure to please subscribe to the channel if you are new around here and you do enjoy what you see and would like to see more of my ugly face in your subscription box. And of course, leave a thumbs up on the video if you did enjoy it. Without any more waffle, I will let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next video, where hopefully I'll catch you there. Goodbye.